Hello and welcome to the Financial Wellness Hour. I am your host, Hirsch, Serman, and I'm thrilled to have you here with me today on WGSN-DB, the Going Solo Network. This show is for those wanting to learn more about creating financial wellness, and we will be taking different life cycles and we're going to explore them both financially and emotionally, because personal finances are more about the emotions associated with your finances than the money itself. Although we may be fairly general in our discussions, we would love to hear from you, so please call in. You can reach me through my website, lifecycle.financial. That's lifecycle.financial. Or you can post your comments, questions, and other things on any of the platforms you're listening to, whether it's Facebook, YouTube, or anything else. Today, we are going to explore how to live your values. This is such an enormously important topic, especially in today's world. There are so many influences, so many messages we've been hit with from all over in all directions, telling us how to behave, who we should be, and it just makes staying true to oneself that much more difficult and living an authentic life even harder than ever before. Today, we got Kevin Adler joining us. He is the founder of the Altitude Group and a life coach, among many other things. So, Kevin, thank you for joining us. It's very nice to have you here.
It's my pleasure to be here, Hirsch. Thanks for having me.
So, Kevin, I'm going to ask, this is not your first career, as with all of us, or many of us, I should say. I'm going to ask you, can you share a little bit about your background, and then what made you decide to become a coach so that people really understand where you're coming from as we kind of have our dialogue?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So I spent the first 30 years of my career in corporate marketing, primarily on the agency side, working for agencies large and small here in Chicago, consulting for Fortune 1000 consumer brands on various layers of their marketing strategy. In 2006, I opened my own sports marketing agency called Engage. We had a great 15-year run. What happened in my story is in 2000, so first of all, the entrepreneurial journey is a roller coaster. There's very high highs, there's very low lows, and I was enthusiastically on board for all of those roller coaster rides. And there's this very powerful TED Talk by a guy named Simon Sinek, and it's called Start With Why. And there's a book, obviously, that he wrote. Great book. And Simon has this very simple point that when you have a powerful and compelling why, you will run through walls to make it happen. And when I started my business, I had a very powerful and compelling why, and I was running through walls to make it happen. And I found over the years, as the entrepreneurial journey wore on, that I was starting to experience some fatigue and some disconnection from my original why. In 2015, I made the hardest decision of my adult life, and I asked for a divorce. As I went through that process, I found my connection to my original why flickering even more. And long story long, in 2018, I stepped back from my business. I took about a 1-year sabbatical. And at the end of that year, it was time to sort of do something again and kind of get off the couch, as you will. And I asked myself the fundamentally important question that I now ask all my coaching clients, which is, what do you want? And the word that kept coming up for me was impact. And I had a coach for 8 years who was instrumental in helping me navigate my way through and ultimately out of a very unhealthy marriage and untangle various other knots that had come up for me along the way in my life. And I thought, man, if I could have the kind of impact on one human being that my coach had on me, that would mean more to me than anything I've ever accomplished in marketing. And so I dipped my pinky toe into the coach training through a global organization called CTI, and fast forwarding to today, here we are.
So I do want to explore that a little bit more, the coach being coached. We'll come back to that. But for those people who are not quite familiar with it, what is coaching and who is it right for?
Yeah, great question. So I'll answer the second part first. Coaching is right for anybody who wants to see a transformational change in their lives and is ready to do the work and be held accountable. There's a great joke in coaching, and the joke goes like this: how many coaches does it take to change a light bulb? And the answer is, it doesn't matter unless the bulb is ready to change, right? And so coaching is for people who are ready to do the work, ready to hold themselves accountable and be held accountable, and to make a measurable change and move forward in their lives. I've been through various forms of therapy in my life, so I'm not here to knock therapy in any way. But this is not therapy. It is not. It is not a place to vent all the things that you are upset about in your past, and then go home and come back a week later for another $250 an hour and vent again. Right? This is about forward progress. And the joke that I like to make when people ask me the difference in coaching and therapy, and again, all due respect to therapy, because therapy is right for certain people under certain conditions. But the joke that I like to make when people ask me the difference is, as a coach, I don't really care about your childhood. I care about today and going forward. Now, I say that with some humor, because we do have tools that allow us to sort of look backwards for the sake of moving forwards.
Right.
So the only reason we look backwards is if there's a place where you are stuck, an unprocessed experience, a traumatic experience that you have not moved forward from. We have tools to look back and process that for the sake of moving through it and past it. But the focus of coaching is today and what you want the rest of your life to look like going forward.
So would you say that they, I don't know if it's supplement or complement one another, or are they really very different in those respects? The therapy versus the coaching.
Yeah, I mean, therapy, just like coaching is like saying martial arts, right? And then you've got to sort of drill down to the individual modalities, taekwondo, et cetera, right?
Right.
There are various forms of therapy. Some are more talk-based and some are more behavioral. I would say the closest thing for me in therapy to coaching is CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy.
Right.
And again, the reason that there's a parallel there is because coaching really focuses on behavioral change. And I want to asterisk that with the notion that there's really two things in the school of coaching that I come from, which is called coactive coaching. The reason it's called coactive is because we look at two things. We look at the duality of your mindset and your behavior. So how can you do something differently, and how can you be differently with a given set of circumstances?
Okay. So there are obviously different kinds of coaches. We, as you said, there's a spectrum. And today we're obviously not talking about your kids' Little League coach. So what is the difference between life coaching and corporate coaching, what sometimes we call business coaching?
Yeah, it's a great question. And again, and it's so important to me, this point. My starting point for any one-on-one coaching engagement, and corporate covers a very broad spectrum of work. There's organizational and team and cultural, corporate culture consulting, and I do a lot of that work as well. But I'll draw the comparison between one-on-one life coaching and one-on-one executive or leadership coaching. And for me, they both have the same starting point, which is really what our broader topic today is, which is values. And I'm a huge believer that whether you're coaching a CEO or whether you're coaching a someone in their personal life, right? You have to really address holistically the whole human being. It doesn't matter if I'm the most talented sales guy on the planet. If I'm stuck somewhere in my personal life, if I'm 75 pounds overweight or estranged from my daughter or trapped in an awful marriage, I'm not going to bring the best of myself to my work. And so the starting point for me in corporate coaching, from a one-on-one perspective with a leader or an executive, and life coaching is grounding that person in their values and then looking holistically at them as a human being.
So people generally, not always, but generally are the same in the workplace and when they leave the workplace. Nobody's person A at work and they leave out the door and they're now person B, right? There's not this drastic change for most people. So is there an overlap in your coaching between, let's say you're working with somebody on the personal level, you're coaching them through that, and now they can take some of these lessons, or I'm asking really, can they, or do they take these life lessons into the workplace, or the other way around, maybe being able to help them, you're working with somebody in the workplace and now they have these abilities to take these lessons out into their personal life. Is there overlap like that, and how does that play in?
Yeah, the answer is absolutely yes, and it speaks to my earlier point about really looking at any person as a whole person. and treating them that way, right? And so by starting the work, by grounding someone in their values, it informs every decision that they make going forward in both their personal and their professional lives. And it's a really important point you make, Hirsch, which is we are who we are at home and at work. We show up as who we are, right? And so our values are the golden thread that carries across the decisions we make in our personal lives and how we lead as a leader, how we show up in the decisions we make at work. It all connects back to who we are and what our values are.
And so when we look at stresses and we look at changes in our life, they're usually more gradual. A couple of the examples you said, if somebody was 70 pounds overweight, they weren't 75 pounds or 70 pounds overweight a week later. It takes time for that to happen. Or if a marriage is not working or whatever it might be, it's gradual. It's less common that something like that's immediate. How do I know my life has got to a point that I am now ready to work with a coach? And I guess, is it ever too late to start working with a coach?
It's never too late. It's definitely never too late. And as far as how you know you're ready, I suppose I would answer that a couple of different ways. Number one, we talk about two different sort of states of being, one being what we call resonance and one being what we call dissonance. And dissonance is when your choices, your thoughts, your behaviors, your actions are out of alignment with your values, and you feel it. You feel it in your body. You get this tension, this resistance that you carry with you all day. And there's this going on internally, right? Because I have a clear set of values. They may be subconscious. I may not be consciously connected to them, but everybody has values. We all operate from a place of values, consciously or subconsciously. So when the choices that I'm making, if respect and appreciation and affection are important values of mine, and I'm not getting any of that in my life, I'm going to feel this, right? And right. I'm going to start to feel trapped, and I'm going to start to feel stuck. And that's dissonance, right? We talk about that as dissonance. When your choices and your thoughts and your feelings and your actions are in complete alignment with your values, that's what we call resonance. And that's when your life feels like it's very much in flow. And by juxtaposition, when it doesn't feel that way, you know it. And sometimes we're able to be very self-aware and course correct in real time in the moment. And sometimes we don't. And sometimes what happens is we're aware that something doesn't feel quite right. We're aware that our life doesn't quite feel the way we want it to. And we just sort of ignore it, and we go through life on autopilot. And cumulatively over time, some people get to a point where they say, there's got to be more than this for me. This isn't the life I want for myself. And I've reached a point where I want to do something about it.
So just kind of trying to take a few of the concepts that you've brought in so far, looking at somebody holistically, the entire being of them, they do have different components of their life. They've got a family life, they've got a social life, they've got a work life. There's a bunch of different things. Am I hearing, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I'm trying to clarify for myself and others. You may have that resonance of several parts of your life, but there could be one or two pieces that are just in dissonance, and those are going to really hit you. Is that what I'm hearing a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's no one size fits all experience, for all of us as human beings, right? There may be, we look at your life in layers. We actually have this beautiful tool called the Wheel of Life. And it's a pie chart, basically. And it's divided into the various sort of slices of what makes up universally all our lives, right? Friends and family, finances, health and wellness, significant other, your physical space, your relationship with money, etc. And we ask folks on the front end of a life coaching engagement, I ask folks on the front end of a life coaching engagement to rate their level of satisfaction in each of those areas of their life. And you could be 7 or an 8 in 8 out of 10 pie slices. And if you're at a 3 in the other 2, and you're living in that experience and feeling that stuckness. So the umbrella brand that I operate under is the Altitude Group, and that's where I do all of my different consulting and advisory work. My life coaching practice specifically is called Unstuck, because the pain point that I'm addressing is stuckness.
So taking that example, I've got that pie chart, 10 different pieces, 8 of them are in altogether there's 2 in dissonance. when you start to change those two, does it ever affect the other pieces, and now those kind of drop a little bit? And how do you balance to maintain that 8 or 9 on those other pieces as you work on the ones that are a 3 and a 4? I mean, is there, and again,
so the analogy I use, and I use this analogy a lot when we're talking about balance, is if you could imagine a series of mason jars, and you label each mason jar corresponding to one of those key areas of your life, right? Friends and family, significant other, the kids, work, whatever, right? Health and wellness. And you have a bowl of stones. And each week, as you're going through the week, anytime you're investing any of your energy in any of those individual areas, you drop a stone in the mason jar. It's a great sort of metaphor for, at the end of the week, being able to look back and say, did I have a week that was broadly and generally in balance? And by the way, it's not going to be proportionally distributed all the time, every day, every week. There are some weeks where you're going to have to lean really hard into work. There's some weeks where something may go on with your kids and you may have to lean really hard into that. So balance is a fluid, living, breathing concept. And it means whatever it means to us as individuals based, again, on what our values are and what's important to us. I don't generally see people decreasing their satisfaction in one area of their lives because they're working on improving their satisfaction in another area. That doesn't generally happen. But balance is something that we talk a lot about, and it is a very nuanced concept.
So yeah, balance is so important. I mean, we hear about work-life balance. We hear about these, I guess they're like terms that are just thrown out because they sound cool. But as you've said, there's a lot of effort that needs to go into this. There's a lot of deliberate thought, deliberate action.
Yeah.
And as a coach, I'm imagining, I'm going to ask you this as opposed to assuming this, you walking that path with them, right? I mean, so they want to achieve something. They've identified something that they want to change. And then how does that play in?
Yeah, let's talk about the idea of walking that path with them for a minute. A couple of things that I'll say about that. Number one, I'd like to say I'm a really good coach, not because I have it all figured out, but because I'm on the same journey of self-discovery and growth that a lot of my clients are on. So I am literally sometimes walking along the same path and sharing the learnings that come from my own personal growth and my own challenges and struggles with my clients in real time. That being said, the important nuance that I want to share here is the idea that, and I tell this to every client in our first conversation, it is your work to do. And the analogy I use is one of my hobbies is I climb big mountains all over the world. And I was climbing a big, scary peak in the Himalayas, and it was a scary climb and a little bit of a rough climb for me. And I got down from the climb and turned to our lead guide, whose name was CJ. And I said, man, CJ, I'm so grateful. I definitely couldn't have done that without you. Thank you so much. And he smiled and he looked at me and he said, your legs, your lungs. And I think it's a great analogy for coaching because I'll be your guide. I'll point you in a direction if I think it's a good path for you. I'll support you on your climb. I'll be there for you as a guide, as an advisor, as a supporter, but it is your climb. It is your legs, your lungs. So it's your work to do. I'm along for the ride with you, but ultimately people need to really embrace the accountability. I was actually just speaking with a lovely woman out of New York yesterday who absolutely needs the help and knows she needs the help. And she was self-aware enough to acknowledge that she doesn't have the bandwidth. She's not ready to do the work right now. And I thought that was wonderfully self-aware. It's a shame because she needs the help, but you got to be ready.
So that's a great point. I want to come back to that. We do have to take a break in a minute. But before we do, Kevin, can you share how people can get in touch with you if they want to reach out?
Sure, absolutely. The website is www.thealtitudegroupinc.com, and I can be reached at kevin@thealtitudegroupinc.com.
Great. Thank you. We will be right back with Kevin Adler. Thank you. Hello and welcome back to the Financial Wellness Hour. We have Kevin Adler with the Altitude Group, founder, and he is a life coach, joining us today, speaking about how to live your values. And I do want to just cover a few different things that we've already covered, and we've got a lot more to go. Also, we are on WGSN-DB, the Going Solo Network. And so we spoke a little bit originally, or starting off with coaching, what the difference is between therapy and coaching and the different types, and who it's right for, a little bit about life coaching or executive coaching and how they kind of play together when one moves from their business world into their social world, and how the lessons and the people are able to bring those lessons with them. We spoke a little bit about how to take a coach and understand what their role is, how you walk that path with them, and not to think that this person has every answer or has everything figured out 100%. It would be wonderful if we did, but we are human, and that brings. But one of the nice things about coaching, I think, is you have the objectivity of that individual that comes with you. They are a little bit removed. Obviously, they are vested because they want to work with you and they want to help you, but they have a very different vested relationship to the work that's being done than you yourself who is going through the coaching. So, we've spoken a little bit about things that happen, how they can happen gradually, whether it's a marriage that is not working, whether it's somebody putting on 70 pounds, whether it's something just not working in their life. But these create emotions, these create stress. And in the thick of these emotions of a life cycle of these changes, how do you help people to identify what are my values and how do I prioritize them?
Yeah, there's really sort of two great questions in one there. So let's talk about how we identify values. And then let's talk about values prioritization, which is such an important nuanced concept. So the way we identify values, my starting point for every one-on-one coaching engagement is what I would call a discovery session. A discovery session is not formal coaching in the traditional sense. It's me asking you 35 of the coolest questions. I joke with friends of mine that they'd be great first date questions because they're so rich and insightful. And I'm asking you, tell me about the last time you got white hot pissed off. Tell me about if money was no object, what would you do with your time? And there's all these beautiful questions. And what I'm listening to are the values behind your answers, because illustratively, our values frame every choice we make, right? And so when I say, tell me about the last thing that got you super steaming angry, that's something that bumped up directly against one of your fundamental core values. And so I'm listening to the values behind your answers. What you net out with at the end of a discovery session is a clear list on paper of your values. And I'm generally pretty spot on. I've gotten pretty good at listening for those values. And so when I read somebody back the list of here's the values that I heard, and I say, is anything missing? They're generally like, wow, you pretty much nailed it there. And once you have those, it allows you to have some conscious clarity on what values are driving your decision making so that you can use that as sort of a filter for how aligned your choices and your decisions going forward are with your core values. The notion of prioritization of values is a really, really important idea because universally, we all have the same values. If I say to any parent out there, do you want to raise an independent, confident, capable, kind child? You'd have to be a maniac to say no to that, right? But in your given decision-making in any given moment, you may prioritize a value that by definition of choosing one subjugates another, right? So if you have a value of, I want to be there for my kids, anything they need, anytime, whatever it is, no matter what it is, because that's how I show love, right? Well, in a given moment, you may be deprioritizing teach my kids independence, right? And so values prioritization is a really important and sort of advanced and nuanced concept that I work with my clients on to help them understand how in a given moment to choose the value that most directly connects to the outcome they want, which is another important point. And I want to zoom out for just a minute. The linear process of coaching at a very 500,000 foot level is values, vision, action, accountability. Now, I'm grossly oversimplifying there, but at a really broad stroke level, that's the process. And when I talk about vision, we've talked about values a lot, and I suspect we're not done talking about values. I'll never be done talking about values, but I want to talk about vision for a minute because vision says I have a clear picture in my mind of the outcome that I desire, right? And whether that's holistically for your life or here's what I want the change to look like in my health and wellness, or as a parent, here's my vision. So hanging on, I'm talking to you from my home office and I can actually see my daughter's bedroom from here. Hanging on the wall of my daughter's bedroom is a letter that I wrote and read to her at her baby naming, right? And it's really a mission statement for the kind of human being I wanted to deliver to the world. And I can tell you, I call it mission-driven parenting. Every single decision I have ever made as a parent goes through the filter of what's in that letter, right? When I'm sitting on the couch with my kid and she says, can I have a glass of water? And I say, yeah, it's in the kitchen. Go get yourself a glass and get yourself some water. That's not me being a jerk. That's me connecting to a prioritized value of teaching my kid independence, right? And to do for herself, right? When she tells me that she's nervous to get up on stage in front of a group of people and do a thing, I say, great, acknowledge those nerves and get up and do it, right? I'm not being the great Santini. I'm teaching my kid to power through adversity and lean into things that are hard so that she can gain confidence that she can do hard things. All of those things correlate very directly to a prioritized set of values for me and a very, very specific vision of the kind of human being that I wanted to deliver to the world. And so that correlates directly back to the idea of prioritizing your values and your decision-making in a way that correlates to your vision.
And I like that because I would venture to say, and I can tell you this from the financial coaching that I do, the vast majority of people have really never thought through what are their priorities, what are their values, what do they really want to achieve, or as you put it, maybe even their vision. This may seem like an obvious question, and it probably really is, but generally they haven't thought through these values. So what are the benefits of living your values?
Yeah, I mean, it's the foundation for living a conscious, connected, intentional, choiceful life. What I say to every coaching client in my first conversation is part of the goal of our work is to take anything that's happening subconsciously and make it conscious so that you can consciously choose to continue to choose it, or you can consciously choose not to choose it anymore, right? And so living a values-driven life is turning off the autopilot switch, right? It's making your decisions conscious so that, to frame it in a financial decision-making context for a moment, when you are walking past the shoe store and the red-heeled Louboutins catch your eye and you say, I got to have those, right? You're slowing down enough to say, what value does me purchasing those shoes honor? And how does it connect to the vision that I have for what I want my life to look like beyond this moment in time, right? So that it's a conscious decision that is grounded in your values and connected to your vision. Because if your vision is, I want to save up to take a big trip this year because I've always wanted to see the world, right? Well, maybe in that moment, buying the shoes isn't the choice that's connected to that value of go explore the world and that vision for what you want that year to look like for you, right? And so I'm not here to label anybody's choices as good or bad. Buy the shoes if you want the shoes, right? But buy the shoes consciously. Buy the shoes in a way that you know what value you're honoring, and buy the shoes in a way that you know how it impacts your vision for what you want your life to look like. There's a process that we call the choice consequence matrix. And it's just an elevated consciousness in your decision making and understanding that every choice you make has a consequence.
So putting that in the financial terms, we would call that opportunity cost, because I'm putting my money, so to speak, into the shoes versus where could I be putting them elsewhere. But one of the things I just want to come back to, what I really like about the way that you bring out those values is, if I'm in a stressful situation, and chances are many people come into coaching are, I mean, we all have stresses in our life. And I've never really thought about what are my values? How do I live my values, create the substantive life that I want? You bringing these values to the forefront through those questions that you were mentioning, and bringing them out in a way that they may not even realize they're highlighting the values. Am I hearing that correctly? So I'm stressed. I'm in this fog of emotion, let's say potentially going through a divorce or just lost a loved one, whatever it might be. You have the ability to work with them and highlight the values and bring them out. And they don't even realize necessarily that's quite what you're doing, it sounds like.
Oh, they very much realize it in the moment because we make it very conscious and intentional. I'll tell you, you mentioned divorce. When I made the decision to get divorced, the most powerful question my coach asked me is, how do you want to show up in this process in a way that honors your values, that is authentic to who you are? And it was such an important question because it created the guardrails for me for every decision that I made during that process. And I'm so passionate about working with people who are going through that stressful life transition, because if you're not consciously connected to your values and you're reacting out of anger or fear or insecurity or hurt or any of those emotions are serving as saboteurs in your decision making, right? And those decisions that you make from those emotional places don't necessarily serve you in the process and in the long run. And so by connecting people to their values and to the vision for what they want their post-decree life to look like, it really reframes the decision-making process and allows people to move through the process in a much more authentic, values-driven way.
I love that. And while we're talking about that, everyone really, to what they do, has their own style, has their own approach. Tell us a little bit about your approach to coaching, a little bit more. We've obviously heard some, but kind of give us a little bit more of an overview, if you would.
Yeah, I tend to, a handful of thoughts there. Number one, I tend to operate within that broad stroke framework that I referenced a couple of minutes ago. So for me, values, vision, action, accountability, and then the asterisk there is this process called saboteur management. I've mentioned this word saboteur. There are 9, I won't walk everybody through them here, but there are 9 sort of archetypes for what the saboteurs are, that are the voices in our head that tend to keep us small and get in our way of making forward progress in our lives. So there's the imposter, who the heck am I to think that I can do this thing? There's the judge, there's the critic, et cetera, the stickler, the hyperachiever, et cetera, et cetera. And we have to identify what those saboteur voices are and the role they are playing in keeping you small and keeping you stuck and keeping you safe, which is a complete illusion, and mitigate their volume and the role they play in order to create that forward momentum that you want in your life. So we ground you in your values. We create a very clear vision for what you want your life to look like. We create an action plan that moves you measurably in the direction of that vision. We create accountability for that forward progress. And then we create a management plan to mitigate the role those saboteurs play. I tend to coach in a little bit of a non-traditional way, in the sense that, sort of the traditional coaching playbook says you can never offer an opinion, you can never offer advice, and all you can do is sit in the lotus position and ask questions. And I tend to show up as a little more human than that. So I will challenge my clients. I will lovingly call BS on them if I think they're telling themselves a story that isn't serving them. And I think that's another really important little point I want to sort of bring to the forefront. We have these narratives that we assign for ourselves. We create these stories about ourselves, about the world around us. And those stories are a choice. Everything we do is a choice. Those stories are a choice. And we often create stories that are very self-limiting. Some folks call them limiting self-beliefs, right? And we need to put those on the wall and look at them objectively. And what is the truth in them, and where might they not be true, and how is hanging on to that narrative serving you, and what might a reauthorship of that story look like, and how might that serve you? So that's another really powerful tool that we use.
Yeah, that reminds me of something I heard probably about 10 or 12 years ago already, where I read this article, and it spoke about people's mindsets and the frame of how they put things. Roughly 60% of the time is in a negative format. Mm-hmm. So what they pointed out is if you think 55% of the time in a negative format, you're technically a positive person, which is bizarre, right? Because you're still thinking more often in a negative format, but you're more positive than the average. And I do like that. I do the same thing. I say to people, sometimes I'm going to answer your questions, and sometimes I'm going to question your answers. I think they need to understand they can't just throw something out there and say, oh, this is how it is, and then, move on without really diving into those answers. And as you said, is it really serving them in a positive way, or is it sabotaging them in that way? And I think in general, coaching obviously is a very personal journey. What I struggle with, or what I want to improve on, is different to other people in general. So and again, I'm being pretty general in this. What are some of the benefits that someone can really expect to get when they're working with a coach?
I think the answer is the opportunity to step into an intentional, choiceful, authentic, connected, values-driven life that they get to design that looks like what they want their life to look like, right? A lot of us go through life on autopilot. There's this old ad for Timberland, the footwear company, and it shows somebody like waking up, like hitting the alarm, and they get out of bed and they drone out of their house and they get into their car and they drive to the train and they get on the train and they go to work and they ride an elevator up to, it says we wake up in our box and we get in our box and we go to the box that takes us to the box, get out of the box, right? And you don't have to be on autopilot. You don't have to feel like you're dragging yourself out of bed in the morning and dragging yourself through life. I made a career change at age 46, and I was very, very well established, nationally recognized for what I did in my previous career in marketing. And I made a career change at 46 because it no longer served me. It was no longer what was lighting my soul on fire. And you have the opportunity to choose every day when you wake up what your life looks like in that day, that week, that month, that year, for the rest of your life. And that's the power of coaching, is helping you connect to your values, create a vision for what you want more of in your life, step into that vision by creating action that moves you in that direction, create accountability for that action, and understand what's getting in your way and mitigating that.
And so we've said this a few times at this point. People need to understand that the work that they're doing with a coach, it's their work, and they need to put in the time, they need to put in the effort. What have you found are crucial ideas that someone needs to embrace for coaching to really be beneficial?
Yeah, they need to embrace the idea that it is their work to do. They need to embrace the idea of intentionality and choice, right? And accountability, and the fact that the world is not out to get them, and that the world is also not going to lay itself out at their feet, right? There's an old biz dev consultant who talks about the sitting around waiting for business to come is laying in the middle of the road and hoping to get run over, right? You have to get up and make it happen every day. And that being said, I have this idea that I use with a lot of my clients that, the meaning of life is finding the balance of letting stuff happen and making stuff happen, right? And in any given moment, you've got to tune into which of those things, does this situation need to be very hands-on engineered by me, or do I need to let it breathe a little bit, right? And let it play out a little bit. But the idea of intentionality, choice, conscious decision-making, accountability for the work, and being open to being challenged on your beliefs and the stories you're telling yourselves.
So I want to come back right at the beginning. We said we were going to talk about the coach being coached, and I think you've been in a few different ways. We've known each other a while. I know that you've been climbing mountains on almost every single continent. You don't just show up and say, oh, I'm going to climb this mountain today, right? You've got a guide, you've got a coach in that. You've had personal coaching. Talk a little bit about the value that you've seen and how that's changed kind of what you do by being coached yourself.
Yeah, I mean, it's repeating the theme. It creates accountability for me. It creates intentionality. It creates consciousness. It creates self-awareness. It's an opportunity, talking specifically about the work I've done as a client with my life coach. It allows me to create a very high level of self-awareness of the choices that I'm making, the thoughts that might be getting in my way, the values that I want to honor, what my vision is for what I want my life to look like. I am, certainly don't nail it every day, but I am living the most intentional version of my life right now that I think I've ever lived, maybe at least since college, if not ever. And that's very much by design. And I think that's another phrase that people can hang on to here is that coaching allows life by design, right? And so I get to live a life that looks very, very much like what I want it to look like. I get to travel all over the world and climb mountains. I play in a band, which I love. I've got this great dog who's one of the great loves of my life. I've got this amazing girlfriend. I get to do work that lights my soul on fire. And all of it is by design, because the alternative is waking up, hitting snooze on the alarm because you just can't bear getting out of bed, and then dragging yourself downstairs and having coffee, not because you enjoy coffee, but because you need to wake up. And which, by the way, you need to wake up. So yeah, it's coaching has been in every aspect of my life, whether it's the coaches that I work with to help me train for the mountain. It's the exact same idea, by the way. A coaching plan that I follow when I'm training for a huge, huge climb starts with the end goal in mind. This is it's a perfect analogy, because you start with the end goal in mind. In February, I'm going back to make attempt number 2 on the tallest mountain in South America. It's called Aconcagua. It's 23,000 feet. And on my last attempt, I turned around at 21,500 feet. So I'm not going to make that mistake again. And I have the end goal in mind, and I reverse engineer from there to build the plan that supports that vision. And I have a workout that I need to do actually after this conversation. And if I don't do that workout, then I'm making a choice that is out of alignment with my vision and my values and my goals, and I'm going to feel that dissonance.
Right. So I'm going to ask, we have about 1.5 minutes left, so we've got to start wrapping up. But share again one more time how people can get in touch with you.
So you can get in touch with me at kevin@thealtitudegroupinc.com. Again, that's kevin@thealtitudegroupinc.com. And the website is thealtitudegroupinc.com.
Kevin, I really appreciate you joining us today, shedding all this great information. Personal growth is not easy, but it's worth it. I don't know how else to put it, right? I am Hirsch Serman, your host for the Financial Wellness Hour. Thank you for joining us. Please reach out to me through my website, lifecycle.financial. That's lifecycle.financial. You can reach out to me with questions, or if you need, for Kevin Adler, our guest today from the Altitude Group. I look forward to you joining me in 2 weeks on my next show. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great week. Thank you.